there's this myth, right? And the myth is you can spend a lot of money just because it's a tax write-off. It's not true, okay? When people tell y'all or when people break down and they say, oh man, Anton, just go ahead and buy it. It's a tax write-off anyway. I'm going to need y'all to be a little bit more intentional. And this is a conversation that will usually come up inside of the Bag Chasers, right? But I'm going to give y'all a little bit of insight. Just because you can justify it from a business perspective does not mean that it is a good idea for you to buy it or spend money on it. Let me say it again. A lot of y'all like to equate this when it comes to NBA players and they got their charities, or record labels and they don't really care if you blow or not because it's a tax write-off, or this company donated to this organization because it's a tax write-off. It's not true. It's not true. It is a myth, okay? Let's say hypothetically that I got let's use a round number. Let's say you got revenue of $500,000 in your business, right? And then part of that business is the expenses. Now, revenue is completely different from what it is that you take home, right? Gross is much different than net. Net is what you take home after expenses. Gross is the amount of money that you generate. So let's just say, for example, you do $500,000 in revenue. That means $500,000 in sales. $500,000 came into you, right? When I'm on these coaching calls with people and they telling me about their business, they think that I'm going to be impressed by how much revenue they did. Man, we did $1 million in revenue last year. I'll be like, okay, that's nice. So what was the net? $50,000. So that means that you paid yourself $50,000 because they didn't even take out a salary, but because it's a single member LLC, that means that they paid themselves. They only made $50,000. I'm not impressed with how much you gross, because your expenses could be right here. You can gross this. It doesn't mean that you're making a lot of money. It means that you're responsible for making sure that money is allocated appropriately so you can generate more revenue. Amazon, for example, this is going to be a lesson for y'all. Take notes. Make sure you rewind this. Make sure you rewatch it because I'm going to give you the game. Amazon, for example, is a growth company. There's a difference between a company that is a dividend-paying company and then a growth stock. A growth stock does not necessarily have to be a startup. So, for example, Amazon does not issue a dividend to its customers, which is one of the reasons why its stock price often at times throughout history continues to be more inflated than maybe, say, a Microsoft or an Apple. A Microsoft has historically made more millionaires than a lot of other companies, a lot of other blue chip companies. But Microsoft every quarter puts money back into the hands of its investors in order to ensure that they get a piece of or a slice of the pie of the revenue. Amazon, for example, on the other hand, and this is why I dropped the video inside of the Patreon of the 8 things that I look for in order to invest in a company, because you can't just throw your money into a stock market and just say, oh, it's going to go up, it's going down, I'm trying to time the market, I'm a day trader. That's not how it works. When you become more informed on who the management is, when you become more informed on how it is that they're performing, what kind of strategy as far as returning shareholder value back to whatever it is or whoever the investors are, you have to understand the dynamics of the company specifically. But I'm going to bring it back to the tax write-offs in order to help you to understand where I'm going and why you need to be a little bit more careful on who you're taking advice from an investment perspective. It's a lot of people that talk business. Very few people understand how money works. It's a lot of people that talk business. Very few people understand how money works. And this is the difference between people that talk it and people that live it. The advice in the game that I'm giving you right now, rich people don't give you this game. They don't have time to give it to you. You got to pay for this. This is a sample of what it is that we do in the conversations that we have inside of the Bag Chasers. But let me bring it back for you. For example, Amazon. Let me come back to Amazon. For a long time, and even to today, Amazon itself, the core business of who they are, never really made money. It was a growth opportunity. They were expanding, similar to how Facebook was when they first came into fruition, when they first launched a site. They weren't making money off of ads. Amazon, even though they sell it to you for the lowest price, what they were focused on doing is taking over market share. Once they take over market share, once they ran out the mom and pop stores, once they competed and they ran you out of business, Then once you became a part of the ecosystem, they can figure out how to monetize it more effectively for you. And then that's when you start seeing Amazon Prime, Amazon Web Services, so on and so forth. But Amazon, the company, wasn't necessarily making money. So if Amazon said, okay, well, we did $100 billion in gross in revenue, but our profit was only $27 million for this particular quarter for this segment of the business, from when you go on Amazon and shop on the website, they break out different parts of the business in the analyst call so you can better understand exactly how they're making money and whether or not it's a good investment. So when I listen to these calls for the companies that I'm looking to invest in or better understanding how the market is going, I know that $1 billion in revenue or $100 billion in revenue doesn't necessarily mean that you're making $100 billion for the company. Everything that they're doing, from reinvesting in the trucks and Rivian and another warehouse and all of these other type of things, those are the tax write-offs, but they're doing that either to give back into the community, getting your good graces, making sure that they're marketing themselves effectively, or they're reinvesting so that they can take more market share and then come back and monetize it. I need y'all to rewatch this. I need you to rewind it. I need you to better understand how to look at things from a business perspective. The one thing that we know for sure, though, is that every large company and every business, small, medium, or large, you can relate it back into your real life. So your life should be a reflection of how it is that you move from a business perspective, whether you're talking about your relationship, whether you're talking about your business, whether you're talking about corporate America, whether you're talking about investing in your 401k and making sure that you continue to raise up and become much more successful as far as what your net worth is, okay? Let me bring it back to a C student's perspective so that we can get to the core of the conversation. When somebody says buy something because it's a tax write-off, chances are it's probably not even a tax write-off because you have to justify it from a business perspective. Now, if you need a coaching call, because there's certain things that I can't say on this live stream, and I'm not a financial advisor, so I cannot give you certain things, but all I can do is tell you what it is that I do and how I look at it from my perspective. You need to email me at antondaniels413@gmail.com. The other side of it, though, is that you don't just spend money just for the sake of being able to have it as a tax write-off, because then the only thing that you're doing is getting rid of the revenue that you have in order to invest in other assets or other parts of the business to grow the business. If I go to a networking event or I hold an event, I'll pay for that. But I'm paying for it expecting for it to bring more value back into the company or what it is that I do from a business perspective. If I fly somewhere, right, I have to fly somewhere, but I also may need to be comfortable. So I may get a first class flight so I can ensure that I got Wi-Fi and I can work more efficiently on the plane and all of this other type of stuff. And I may eat on the plane in first class because they'll serve you a 3-course meal so that I can then save myself some time for when I land and I can keep running and I can do whatever it is that I'm supposed to do. Now, the other side of it is that your business may not make the type of revenue, or you may not be looking at the type of financial windfall that comes along with being able to justify spending an extended amount of money in that business in order to continue to grow it. It may not be feasible for you to spend it just because you can justify it from a tax perspective. Because it's still revenue, it's still your money. If you have to go into your pocket in order to do something that's not actually generating additional revenue for the business, it doesn't necessarily mean you're saving yourself some money. It's a simple equation, and I'm not going to break it down too extensive because I want to get into other parts of the show. It's a simple equation, all right? It comes back down to this. If I make $100,000 a year, right, and I can do this thing and I can justify it from a business perspective, and let's say my business is going to take a loss that year. So let's say my business takes a $10,000 loss, which means that my adjusted gross income is now $90,000. Schedule C, I'm not going to get into that. You make $100,000 on your job. Your business lost $10,000. You really only made $90,000 for the year, which means that that's what you're being taxed on. That's what you're being taxed on. Now, let's say you in a 12% tax bracket, you can get it under $80,000, right? I know y'all don't like to do math. I know y'all wasn't paying attention in class, but we going to mine it out. Let's say that you get it down under $80,000 and you married, right? That means that you in a 12% tax bracket. You spent $10,000 to save $1,200. You don't get it, do you? Spend the $10,000 so that you can save $1,200 or $1,000. Because all you're doing is reducing 10 to 12% off of what it was that you spent in order to justify it as a tax write-off. So essentially, you gave yourself a 10% discount in order to justify overspending on that thing that you shouldn't have had in the first place. I'm going to break it down one more time. Let's say you're in a 10 to 12% tax bracket and you spend $10,000 in order to justify it and say, yo, it was a tax write-off though. Whatever you bought, if you can justify it from a business perspective, the only thing you're doing is giving yourself a 10 to 12% discount on the thing that you purchased, because then that is going to be reflected in your adjusted gross income that you file with the IRS. So you're not saving $10,000. You're saving 10 to 12% of whatever it is that you bought, because then that's the amount that you're reducing your tax burden by. Now, the better thing for you to do is to actually use that money and deploy it into something that's going to return more value to you long term. So if I invest in a studio and I spend $50,000, I can justify that as a tax write-off. I reduce my tax liability by whatever it is my tax bracket is. However, the long term is that I'm going to generate an additional $500,000 as a result of it. Don't just buy stuff as a result of trying to justify it from a business perspective. Reduce your tax burden legally, but also be looking to build your businesses and what it is that you're building for the future. Don't just do it because you're trying to support your lifestyle. The biggest myth and the dumbest things that I see from people is that they truly do not understand the numbers and from a business perspective how it is that they're supposed to operate. So when you see these people and you see these rappers and you see these entertainers and they say, I ain't care nothing about that math, that ain't helped me in real life. Well, it's just because you don't understand it from a business perspective. I tell you one thing, when you start talking about that money and you start hitting my pockets, I'm paying attention. Maybe the problem with school is that they're not relating it back to you in real life. They're not relating it back to you in real life. They need to start using real life examples in school so that you can then better understand how you can deploy your resources strategically. I'm okay with buying this new microphone. I'm okay with spending $250, $300, $1,000, whatever on this particular thing because I can justify it because it's going to add more value into my business. But if I can't justify it because it's not going to actually generate me more revenue or create a better product that I think is going to add more value into what it is that we're doing, set it to the side and redeploy your capital. Don't just go buy the car because you can afford it from a financial perspective, but you can't justify how it's going to bring more value to your business. Okay? I hope that y'all listening to me. I hope that y'all paying attention. I hope that y'all really, really are getting the value of what it is that we usually have conversations about in the Bag Chasers. Because I don't usually make this type of information available to people, and I don't usually talk like this on a live stream, but I did want to give you guys some incentive as to how it is that you need to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more focused, and a little bit more dedicated to doing the thing that's in your best interest. Don't just let these idiots just say stuff to you like, whoa, they're just doing it because it's a tax write-off. No, they're not. No, they're not. Can they justify it from a business perspective? Yes. Is there more to it than just justifying it from a tax perspective? Absolutely. You need to understand and look at things from a business perspective. Stop running in the victim Olympics. This information is available to everybody, not just immigrants, not just people that white people or Mexicans or, it's available to you too. The library is open. The internet is open. If you stop looking at porn so much, you can probably find a little bit more information, or you can just join a Patreon and we can do it that way. Link is in the description as well as pinned to the top of the chat.